surprisingly, most people think I'm a consultant. I'm not. We're actually a full service agency that helps with voice of the customer and customer feedback. We do this with a system that we have called Customer Insights 360. And that allows companies to get insights in areas that they typically are struggling with. Some obvious places, onboarding, and then exit, interviews or surveys, but then also different points along the customer journey. Getting some of those, early churn reasons or those what puts customers at risk of churning. I think there are several. Most often we'll hear price is the justification for other things that are going on. I really don't like to suggest KPIs because every company is different, but I will say this, that you have your overall churn metric, which is several metrics rolled up into it. You should really be looking at segmenting your churn because churn rates are going to vary over time, right? If you have an annual contract, and you're going to notice like that your churn rates will be highest then. Okay, so that's a little different perhaps from where it's monthly, but you still need to look at your different customer segments as well and see which ones have the highest churn rate when that contract is supposed to be renewed. Everybody. I think everyone should. Even, happy customers come from happy employees. I really believe that if employees are really miserable and you have high employee turnover, it's going to lead to unhappy customers from the top right down to the bottom, whether they're customer facing or not. We really don't do that because we're trying to find the reasons why versus looking after the fact why customers have churned and dig into data. There are other people that I partner with who are really good on the quantitative side. So that's not something that not only we don't get into, but also myself personally. So it still comes down to looking for those insights and what are they and how do you gather them. But the strategy is not to wait until something happens, the customer churns, and then try to find out why they left. The strategy is to, throughout the customer journey, you were taking these little checks, little pulses. And the second strategy, like I mentioned, is with new processes or new initiatives. So the strategy is overarching, right? But how you execute might be different. So for certain segments, you might send a longer survey versus interviews. For other segments, you might want to do more interviews and just maybe a couple smaller surveys, not just NPS, but going beyond that to, maybe it's 4 or 5 questions, or perhaps sending out even an annual longer survey that might be as long as 20 questions. And then each customer segment should have the how. How are we going to make this strategy happen? So this is not my quote, but I've heard from someone else, renewals should happen every day. In other words, the relationship needs to be built throughout the entire process so that when it comes time for a renewal, the renewal is again, not my quote, but a non-event. I wish there was like a checklist because there's things like customer health scores that can be used. So actual, a set of data that come in and gives, a score based on what you put into that, as well as the weightings of it. That's one way. Another way is, you see things at this point, it's all observational, obvious signs, but it's also sometimes in just the listening, even in a conversation, you're noticing certain things that are no longer being said. There isn't a checklist to say, well, if this, and this, because even customers with great health scores churn suddenly. and unexpectedly. Something probably needs to be discussed, and maybe some difficult conversations need to be had to understand what those changes are. So you see behavior, really, it's behavior, it's change in emotional state and participation. And then, of course, not hearing certain things anymore, or hearing new things that indicate, oh, there might be an issue here. So it's all three. I have something called the 25 churn factors. So this is my recommendation. Like, there's some things that are really out of your hands, market conditions, what's happening internally with the customer. Out of those 25, there's about 5 or 6 that truly there's not much you can do about. There's a good chunk that are product, right, related. So CSM, CS leaders might have a tiny bit of influence, but on the whole, that's not going to be theirs either. But there's about a good 12 to 15, which are definitely related to the CS leader or chief customer officer or CSM. Absolutely. My recommendation is, again, the strategy is, if we want to reduce churn, how do we do it? Pick one of those every quarter and focus on improving it. Just pick one. That is what I'd recommend.